Hey everybody, we're live on Shout Your Causes page. This is Elaine Moore and I'm Sally Hendrick. Shout Your Cause is the nonprofit arm of my business that I started to help raise awareness about worthy causes or, issues that are going on, to have general, discussions around that are a safe place to have those discussions. We can talk about anything and be very mindful of who we've got in the audience and what it is we're doing. So what I want to announce today is that this is our final discussion on White Fragility. White Fragility is a book by Robin DiAngelo. I know there's a longer title to it. There's like a subtitle, and I'm not saying that so because I don't know what it is. But we finished it up. We had to do chapters 11 and 12 for tonight. I actually did not get the end credits in this afternoon. I had a lot of client stuff to deal with, so I didn't finish that part. But Elaine, I think you've been in every single one of these. Thank you very much.
Yes, it was an honor. I was glad to be a part of this.
Yeah, I think it's awesome. I'm so glad that I finally got to get to this book because, to be honest with you, I'm terrible at actually reading the books, doing the things. And this one was so heavy that it really took creating this discussion group around it to make it something that I could do. So, and I appreciate you being here. I know we're supposed to have one or two more people, maybe even three more join us tonight, and that's fine. When they come in, we'll just pick it up from there. So anything you want to mention? How's your week been? Anything going on?
I just have been I wanted to make sure that before we finish this whole session, I was so appreciative of being able to cover this book with the group of people and the input, because it was kind of like you said, it was a very heavy topic. And I think I probably would have read through it more quickly, like by myself, but I don't know about the comprehension and the retention. The time to reflect, and I think that's something huge in something like this, because I do not have, I don't have very many white friends that I can have these types of discussions with, that for whatever reason they're in a different space, different place and time, and to bring this up, I feel like that I would get like a glassed over look.
Like, huh? Yeah, right. What are you talking about? What do you mean? What is white fragility? And all these things.
Yeah, and so this has been very beneficial. I'm hoping that over time that my circles will evolve and grow, and then I can meet more people, that I can have some sort of dialogues like this with some level of I don't know what the word is, maybe not safety, but just level of being able to be transparent and talk about hard things.
Yeah. Well, it requires a lot of trust, because these are hard things to talk about. And we're not even on the more difficult end of the situation with this in the United States. Exactly. And here we are talking about it, right? And we're trying to push through this and say, we are not going to be the ones with white women's tears coming down our face, right?
And the term that comes out, what I don't know if I'm using it in correct context, but virtue signaling, I'm not doing this because, I want some pat on the back. I don't want to be told that I'm woke. I'm really trying to talk about these things to learn and to grow and to help others in my sphere of influence to grow too.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, chapter 11 is called White Women's Tears. Yeah. Which I had heard, I think maybe Lori Grant, who's been on here a few times, yes. She's supposed to show up. She mentioned that before, and here comes Keaton. She mentioned that before, and I didn't know what she was talking about, but now after reading the chapter today, I do know. So I'm about to add Keaton to the stream. Hey, Keaton, how are you?
Hello, I'm doing great. How are y'all?
So, I hear you've moved.
I have. I've moved to Brentwood from West Tennessee. So I moved from a very small town to a very big city. And so far, I'm loving it.
Congrats.
Awesome.
Thanks
Gonna
so
have me over
much.
for dinner.
What?
That's about
Gonna
dinner.
have me over for dinner.
Yes.
What's
very
your
soon.
specialty, Keaton?
Well, tonight was enchiladas, which I
Made or
surprised
purchased?
myself. Oh, I made them.
Shut up.
Mhm.
All right, good for you.
With ground
Did
turkey.
you really?
Yes, ma'am. Yes,
Oh,
ma'am.
yeah, that's right. You did. You were doing that.
Okay. I
Well-
don't think I've ever made enchiladas. So, all right.
Well, they looked
They're
good. I
good.
saw a picture of them earlier. Keaton is my nephew, so if anyone doesn't know that, he is somebody who I'm very close with, and I'm so glad he's moved to nearby where I am. So anyway, Keaton, we were about to start in on chapter 11, which was called White Women's Tears. And the thing,
Mhm.
at first I was like, I don't even know what that means. But basically, a lot of white women's tears, just from like a supposed fear, have caused a lot of black men to be terrorized. Think Emmett Till. That was the very first thing that the author talked about in this chapter, was the fact that when a white woman cries, a black man gets hurt, and then went into the Emmett Till story about how he, apparently she said maybe that he had flirted with her or something. He was a child, wasn't he? Wasn't he really young?
He was young.
Yeah, and he was mutilated, but
and she recanted, in 2017 before she died.
Yes, before she died on her deathbed, basically said that nothing wrong happened. The kid had not done anything wrong, and I'm sure she carried that guilt with her entire life. But even if she had stepped forward, she's dead now, but if she had stepped forward and cried about it, I'm sure a crowd of people would have been like, I'm so sorry, but I'm not sorry for you. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel sorry for you, kind of a thing. And that's kind of the attitude of what you get from this entire chapter, is that white men will be they seem to be very affected by white women who cry, are hysterical, are very emotional. They tend to want to shut that down. It affects them very much so in their emotions. And then men will become aggressive. And a lot of people, when they want to talk about racism today, and they want to have these discussions across color, the lines of color among people, basically one of the things I wrote down was, all attention goes to the white woman when she is confronted with a racist situation. The black people are typically ignored and not allowed to sorry, Lori's asking me for the link.
No worries.
Right there. Text above is that it? Should be right there. Sorry, link is above the image. Okay. Hopefully she's getting that. All right, so let me see. Let me get back. Sorry about that. I got a little distracted. So there was I guess the author was talking to a woman about going to an event, and there was, going to be a discussion and everything. And the black woman said, I don't want to be around any white woman's tears. So if you promise me that they're not going to be crying and all this stuff, because it's like, too little too late in a way, as far as the tears are concerned. It's like, I'm sorry, but we have deeper tears to be crying over here because of the situation that we've been through as, as Black women.
Mhm.
There she comes. Hey, Lori, sorry about that. Glad you made it.
Sorry about
Hey.
I like your sign in the
Yes,
back.
I just
Real men
noticed.
feel.
that. Oh, thanks.
Is that Andy's Real Men Feel?
Yes.
Yes.
I think I have to. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, it's not
Kinda
real
got hard. I
loud.
can hear you.
It's going to be better in a second.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. Those
Get
cans
all
and
fancy.
headphones. All right.
How's
Keaton,
that?
where'd you go? You got to get back on screen, dude.
Is that better?
Where'd you go?
I don't know if your voice is coming through. Okay,
How's that? Is that better?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What kind of setup do you have?
much better.
That's it.
I'm having a problem. I'll be right back.
Okay,
I'm still,
Okay.
just
Yeah.
holler at me when
I'll
you
be-
come
I
back.
moved,
or
but
we'll
I mean-
remove you from the stream. Okay. All right. So it'll just be us until he comes back to the screen. We were getting into that first chapter of at the end, 11th chapter actually, about white women's tears and about how Black women don't want to be hearing about this because we've been hearing about white women's tears for years and years and years, accusing Black men of things that are innocuous, things that are, there's nothing going on there, but these men have been tortured as a result. When we mentioned the Emmett Till case and, that sort of thing.
Right.
So, and then we talked about how white men come in to save the white women as they are targets of harm. People of color are then abandoned from the conversation.
Right.
Almost as if they're not allowed to cry or be emotional or upset or angry. They're, expected to be stoic and strong. And I thought we might talk about that a little bit because that's, those are some pretty tough statements to get through.
Yeah. Yeah. I know when I re-listened today and I still like every time you hear that like don't cry thing, I'm like my initial reaction is that defensive, like, well, what the hell? I'm allowed to have my emotions. And then you listen to all the reasons why and you're like, yeah, I guess I get that. It's a really, like my emotions then outweigh theirs. So
Right.
The phrase that's used is called centering, I think.
yeah.
Yeah.
And everyone races to like fix the white woman instead of taking care of the actual issue.
Yeah.
Which makes sense because right, like you see it, right? Like even the case where the woman
In the Central Park with the dog.
Yes.
But she was so
yeah.
manipulative and insidious. You know how she turned it on the phone. Oh,
Right. So she sort of did that same, like, well, I didn't mean for it, right? And then everyone's like, oh, she's trying, and it's totally negating what she actually did. So
Right.
I was listening to it today, I was like, oh yeah, I get that. Like it's always like, well, I didn't mean anything by it. Instead of it doesn't matter what your intent was, the impact is this. And I have to always go back to that. Intent is irrelevant. Impact is everything.
Right. And just like, and I brought this up in one of our other talks one night where Maya Angelou has that quote about, people will forget what you say, what you do, whatever else she said, but they'll never forget how you made them feel.
Right.
And the emotional part of it is, that is the lasting piece. That's the one that has the stickiest memory to it.
Right.
Well,
and even how she talked about if it's a Black woman who's crying and upset, then it's the angry Black woman.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
So for some reason, the white woman can be angry and upset, but that's acceptable. But you can't have the angry Black woman.
Right.
So that was a bit disturbing.
Well, and it makes you wonder too. Let's go into like just male-female relationships. What is it about women that they, whomever, will use an emotional reaction to get our way.
I have seen that. I know when we talk about the tears, I've seen it, and I've noticed, and I don't think that I'm unique in this, where you kind of know before a scenario of what will elicit certain reactions and responses.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, as a woman, that if you cry, depending on your audience, that can tailor how the reaction is. I know for me, I'm a crier anyway, but I will try very hard, because especially if I'm trying to convey a certain point, I don't want it to be, would distilled be the right word? I don't want it to be changed. So I'll sit there and try to stuff my tears as much as possible to try to push through, because I know that certain emotional responses can manipulate a situation.
Mm-hmm. And that'll either get you what you want or it won't.
Right.
Right. And I think a lot comes from, like, that's our childhood too, right? Like for me, I was always taught that that wasn't going to work. Like
You're looking kind of spooky, Keaton.
Keaton, you look scary. You're muted. Yeah, I get that. I understand what you're saying.
But that I was more intrigued actually by the conflict that arises for the black male in that situation. Like that the patriarchy takes over as opposed to the race. And then he lives with the guilt of coming to the defense of a woman that was crying, but then he negated the person that was actually offended, which is his black sister.
Right.
And so I was much more intrigued by that aspect of how he lives with the guilt of coming forward to be the savior, but yet at the same time he saved, I don't want to be bold, but I guess the wrong person.
But you wonder, it's like, what is it that history has learned and within us and taught us, passed down generation after generation? Right. What is it about the reaction of a black woman versus a white woman, a black man versus a white man? What is it that happened in history that was taught? A certain behavior was taught. And then that just gets passed down. We all know that we all like become our mothers, or we become our fathers, or there's some sort of aspect about us that reacts to environmental situations the same way.
Right.
And so if you grow up in a situation where you are coming out of slavery, for example, or some sort of dominating situation like that, what is it that you learn? You learn to be quiet. You learn to shut those tears down, because it could have gotten you killed.
Right. Right. Yeah, it's a trauma reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. Trauma reaction.
Right.
So,
right, and we know that that it's carried right through the lineage, so we know that that's going to happen. And even if they weren't descendants of slavery, they were, right. The majority of people that are of color in this country have certainly been treated crappily. So it doesn't matter if they came from that or not. You know what I mean? Like at this point in time,
right.
It's so ingrained in the system that it doesn't really matter if you are actually an ancestor of enslaved people. Sorry.
Yeah. Somebody responded, said, hello, sorry I couldn't join. I had another call. That may be Michelle. I'm not sure. It just says Facebook user on my screen. But we did have one more that was going to join us, but that's okay. At the end of chapter 11, the thing that I wrote was, we must ask how our racism manifests, not if our racism manifests. And so I thought that was kind of interesting if we think about how, as opposed to denying it altogether. there's a lot of people. Oh, Lauren, sorry, Lauren, that was Lauren. There are a lot of people that get very offended. We've talked about this throughout the entire series, throughout the book, that a lot of people will be offended to be even accused of having racism. But the thing is, we all have it. Everybody has it. It's within us. It's a matter of understanding how it comes out of us, in what ways,
Right.
and acknowledging the fact that it's there. And when you're aware of something, that's when you can help change the situation. You cannot change a situation if you deny it all the time and don't acknowledge it.
Right. Right. Yeah, and that's a big challenge, right? I go back to the binary, non-binary racism
Mhm.
concept, because I think it's a little easier to swallow, if you will, to not have it be like, you're a racist, blah, da, 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 and just be like, yep, I have unconscious biases. Consciously, I try really hard not to let them out. Unconsciously, I fail.
Mhm.
So
But we're taught certain things. We're taught to
right,
react a certain way. We're presented with images and with stories and situations that inherently become our limiting beliefs, if you will. That's
well,
something. Yeah.
our history's been whitewashed, so we don't really have a true a true understanding of what really has happened. So the one of the more powerful things that in the later chapters was doing our research and finding things out, because I'm on a few different Facebook groups where they post historical events that happen to Black communities,
Mhm.
and I'm just like, what? What do you mean this happened?
Yeah,
Like,
nobody
I had
knows.
no idea. And it wasn't that long ago. Like, this was like in the 70s and the 80s. I'm like,
Mhm.
we're not talking about, the 1800s anymore. We know it was in the 60s, was, the 50s and 60s, it was really, really bad.
Yeah.
But
But then the 70s and 80s, and
it's
even
still
on up
going
to
on.
today. Yeah, there's
Right.
still.
Still going on. And, I was just reading about the young girl who was killed in 1991 in LA, the year before the LA riots, with Rodney
Rodney
King.
King, yeah.
There was a 15-year-old Black girl that was supposedly stealing an orange juice at a local Korean market, and she was shot in the back of the head, 3 feet away. The store owner, after like they had a tussle, and she put the orange juice container onto the counter, and she turned to walk away, and the shopkeeper shot her. So she was already leaving the store. So the shopkeeper was found guilty, but had to do 400 hours of community service. There was no time served for murder.
And that's it.
Ugh,
Yeah.
that was it.
So everything,
Makes my stomach hurt.
so yeah. So then as I was reading, they were like, and I guess Tupac wrote a bunch of songs about it. And so then it was like the real reason for those riots was not just Rodney King. It was Latasha, whatever. I don't remember her name, but her first name was Latasha. And so it's again the like George Floyd. It wasn't just George Floyd getting murdered. It was yet again another
Yeah.
Black. It was just another person.
Just here we go again. Just
Right. And
keep
so
throwing salt in the wound.
right. So at some point, like, even if it's not, because people are all like, well, he was already a criminal. Why are you like tying which
I'm like,
I disagree with completely. But it's like, it doesn't matter. They didn't know he was a criminal. Just good God, it's like the guy they shot in the back for 7 times. They didn't know who he was. He was
mm-mm.
just a Black man that had the audacity to turn his back on a white man and walk away, which is almost how I feel like this Latasha must have been. Like, she just had enough and turned around and walked away. And that's, you know,
Mm.
She thought she was done. You know, she
Yeah.
thought the exchange was over. I'm walking away now.
Right.
Lauren said, "I'm ashamed I didn't know about Tulsa until Watchmen, and it
Yeah.
made me physically sick."
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something too. I didn't know about Tulsa until I saw a video of a woman during the initial protests and riots, and I can't remember where she was, but she did this really empowered speech. She
I
had
think she
been
was in
going
Minneapolis.
around, she'd been going around this city with her husband or boyfriend or something, who was documenting everything because he's a documentarian, and he they'd just been talking to a whole lot of people, and she had taken some classes herself, and she was a Black woman, and she gave this speech about everything that had happened, and talked about history and going through history, and she compared it to a game of Monopoly, the 400 rounds of Monopoly or whatever. It was so powerful what she said.
Mhm.
And she mentioned Tulsa in that, and she mentioned wherever it was in Florida. And I went and looked everything up, and I was just like,
Oh,
oh
yeah.
my God.
Rosewood. Is it Rosewood in Florida?
Rosewood, yes. And Greenwood was the name of the neighborhood in Tulsa.
Yeah.
Right. And then there was.
I'm from Tulsa, and I didn't. I was born and raised there,
And you
and
didn't
I'm
know?
ashamed to admit it, but I was there, left in like 1991. I won't say that I didn't know about it, but probably I knew like a fraction. Like something happened in the 1900s, but that was the extent of it. It wasn't until after I left, and I was born and raised there. I've had some people who I went to high school with. They said that they remembered it being covered, and I'm like, well, what class was I in?
Well, and how could it not be covered more?
Right,
Like,
exactly.
what did
Right.
you
If
spend
it
a
was
half
covered,
hour
maybe I
on it?
missed that day. I don't know.
I would
but-
think you would go to the neighborhood and walk around, and there would
Well,
be
and I'm
memorials.
actually from North Tulsa, which is where
Yeah.
it took place. I live about maybe 2 miles away. The streets the streets are Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. Those are 3 streets that were kind of in sequence. And actually, if you're familiar with the Gap Band,
Hmm?
the Gap Band, that's where they're from. That's where the
Ah.
GAP fit comes from. Greenwood, Archer, and Pine. So
Interesting.
a couple miles away, I'm like, so yeah,
Right.
it wasn't really covered that much. I can say that.
So, well, and that's the whole thing. And now we have our wonderful president saying that he's going to create pro-American history, and I'm like, no, history isn't pro one way or the other. History is just
History is
actually what happened,
documents.
not
Factual,
like
not
not
revisionist.
like let's just ignore all the stuff we don't like, which is
It's
what
not a
they've
marketing.
done.
It's not a marketing book.
But that's what he wants to do, right? And I mean, and that's what they're doing. Like Texas actually approved changes in their historical textbooks to remove part of Jefferson's writings about separation of church and state.
No.
So yes, because certain states they if they don't buy the federally mandated books, they can adjust their books accordingly. Like each state can do that, and Texas has agreed to do that, and they don't put in all the same information about slavery.
Okay.
So
Done.
it's just, I mean, it's not getting better. People still want to change the history instead of owning it. And the longer we go without owning it, the more we're going to have riots, the more we're going to have problems, because riots come from oppression. That's why they occur. They're not occurring because everything is hunky-dory.
Yeah.
Oppressed
Yeah.
people will have enough and say, screw you, I don't care. Doesn't matter if we burn it down because we're not reaping any rewards from it anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So Keaton, what have you got to say about the situation? I know that you haven't been reading the book, but we're bringing in other life experiences and things into this. What have you got to say, like about where you grew up or anything like that?
I have to know that this is a public forum, so the things that I say can come back and haunt me. Um, so I need to choose my word carefully. But I know that there are people from where I'm from, just like anywhere, where people are in denial, for a lack of a better word, um, and because they're just like, if people would quit talking about it,
It would go
if people
away.
would just quit talking about it, it would go away. And then I was also told, and I know that that's true because a black person said that, and I'm like, this is really rough. And where I graduated from college, I graduated in May from the University of Tennessee at Martin, and when everything happened with George Floyd and things like that, people started coming together. And there was actually another incident that happened where a few people in sororities and fraternities made a Snapchat, and it was
I was
like
going to say, it was
recorded.
that Snapchat video that went
Yeah,
around.
it was that Snapchat video, and it was appalling to watch. And the university chose not to take any course of action about it, and just kind of let it, like, just
They didn't?
didn't do anything about it.
What
They
what
didn't.
what was the
And
Snapchat
so
video?
a lot of people. It
There
was
were 4 kids in a room, a dorm room or apartment or whatever, and they were making fun of black people, and saying something like, I hate blacks, and laughing and joking and
yeah,
whatever, and
and
put it
yeah,
on
yeah, and
Snapchat.
don't put this. Yeah, and said don't put it on your story because black people are going to see and they're going to come and shoot you, kind of thing.
Yeah, they were
And they just
saying
said
that.
that,
Uh,
for everyone to see. Um,
And
and
put it on
it
there
was really
anyway.
appalling, and it got to a point where, right, and then it got to a point where all of us kind of um joined forces and put this united front up and said there needs to be some kind of African African American history and thought course,
Mhm.
um, that educates us as to our history and helping
Yeah,
us
because I mean, you
understand
can only
where
learn
we've been.
so many things.
Right,
Like,
and like yeah, and like Lori was saying, it's like a snowball effect. I wanted to chime in and say that, but it's like a snowball effect because if we don't understand where we've been, how can we move forward and make progress? We're clearly not making the progress that we need to. It's 2020. Come on. Like, so there is an African American history and thought class, and it's still being fleshed out into a full-fledged course. But people from my hometown, when I was having conversations with them about it, they were just like, if people would just quit talking about it, it
yeah.
would just not be a problem. And I know that that's the truth because a black person said it. I'm like,
yeah. And I'm like, okay, and how have you changed over the years? The person who said that, they haven't.
No.
Yeah.
right,
And that's great. Like,
right,
you have that one black person that says, yeah, racism doesn't exist. And then of
Mm.
course the other 99.9% of them are going, are you insane? Of
Right.
course it exists.
Like, hello.
And just, I mean, you can hear it, right? Like I've
and
seen posts about like the wealthy black guy, the sports players. They have enough money.
mhm.
Why would they should put their money where their mouth is. I had this whole conversation with somebody going, why is it okay for you to tell black people how to protest and where they should spend their money? Where are you putting yours to end racism?
Yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna
It's
say. Like, you're a
just
Well,
celebrity.
I've
You could,
seen this.
like,
I've seen this in stuff a lot. I've seen a lot of comments where people will say, well, Obama had 8 years to fix this or that or the other. Why didn't he fix it? Talking about the
oh,
Confederate flag and the statues
oh
and
my
just
God. Can you
all these
imagine
other
if he
things.
tried to do that?
Oh my God. And so I basically love to comment, and I say it all the time now. Sorry, but the black man's not here to clean up the white man's shit.
No.
Right.
So he's not here to clean up after you.
They didn't make the mess.
Yeah, we
It's
did.
not his job.
No.
It's our job.
And can you imagine if he said no more Confederate flags?
Yeah.
Oh,
you
people would
imagine?
have absolutely gone ballistic.
Oh my
People were
God.
hanging an effigy of him when he was it during his pregnancy or when he was running?
Yes.
Mhm.
Yes.
And that was just at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His wife was called what? A gorilla in heels?
Yeah.
Yeah, an ape in heels
Yeah.
by somebody like a
Some other elected
authority
official.
figure
Among
in
other things.
Virginia.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can't fix 400 years of oppression in 8 years. That's what Lauren says in the comments over
Yeah.
here. So I'm going back to some of my notes, and basically, chapter 12 is talking a lot about comfort and discomfort in discussing these issues.
Mm.
And about white comfort basically means you're maintaining the racial status quo. Discomfort is required if you want to change. This is always the case in anything we do in life. If we want things to change, we have to go through something uncomfortable, something against the grain, in order to get past that and make a true change.
I mean, even look at, like, if you think about a simple analogy that has nothing to do with, race, look at exercise.
Oh,
The
yeah.
The building of muscle. There's a tearing away. Growth comes through pain. Can't get it otherwise.
Yeah. And sometimes you have to sacrifice. You have to be willing to say, I'm going to be uncomfortable so that it will get better. I'm going to sit down with some of my friends of color and ask them questions and have them be able to say, I don't want to fucking talk to you about it, or I'm willing to talk to you, but I don't want to hear any backlash. It's being able to, reach out and go, I think I'm doing the right things. Am I on the right track? Do you think I'm making a difference? What else should I be doing?
Mm-hmm.
Is there something else? I loved Robin DiAngelo's example of that, like very what some of us would think of as not much of a comment, like saying, "Oh, we were at an event and one of the people was very upset because they didn't like so and so's hair." And the woman that she was talking to took offense to it. And her whole thing was, to just be able to sit and listen to that person, like to go and apologize and not say, oh, I didn't mean to do it. Just, I apologize for what I said. And how can I repair it?
Yeah.
And I was like, that is some beautiful feedback and great role modeling. And
I also, did you see the phrase that struck me too was something that I heard, is that not using passive framing. Remember that, where it said, you don't say, if you were offended. I like that it said, apologies that start this way are subtle efforts to put the onus of the recipients.
right. Right.
And we're saying the breach was not inherently offensive, but if you were offended because of your extreme sensitivity, then we're sorry. I thought that was really good.
Right. Because because it's that whole thing. Well, it goes right back to, well, I didn't mean it.
Yeah.
And it's like, it doesn't matter. If you said something that offended somebody, just freaking apologize.
Yeah. No, don't stick a butt on the end of it.
Right. No stipulation.
But I didn't mean to. So, or the ever common, oh, I was only joking. Come on. You can't take a joke.
Yeah.
Like that's always been my favorite, when somebody said something that pissed me off.
Yeah.
I liked how at the end of the chapter, Robin went back to actually kind of frame out how to respond to what she had done with the woman, how she had offended her when she talked about the hair. And so I took notes on that basically said, and she called it the repair. Yes. She actually said the repair. So,
which I really liked.
Yeah, because it gives us a framework of how to approach things in the future. And whenever you have notes and a framework from which to work, it makes things easier to walk through.
Right.
If you're doing it from your hip, from the hip and off the cuff all the time, that makes it a little bit harder, especially when it's an uncomfortable situation. So if anybody wanted to have these kind of notes, I am going to be putting a pretty lengthy blog post together that embeds all 5 of the videos from our discussion. And I'm going to put all my notes that I have. I'm going to present it into the group as well and see if you guys have any edits you want to make or quotes you want to give to put in the article. From the hip and off the cuff all the time. Who's that watching me?
That was me. I hit a button. I hit a button. I was like, oh.
So she called it steps to address our own racism. First, process the reaction with another white person for reassurance in what you said. Because if you said something that you want to kind of check yourself on, go talk to someone else that can help you discuss it back and forth. Not someone who's going to just give you a pass, but someone who's going to really check you, be honest with you, because you need to understand what it is that you've done. And you can vent your feelings to that safe person first. Then go back to the person of color that you may have offended and ask to meet, ask for permission. Do not just assume that they're going to want to talk about this. Just like with anyone, if somebody needs
important.
Somebody needs more space, you better give them more space, because otherwise it's not going to end well.
Right.
Do not focus on intentions, but in effect, sorry, I mistyped something. Do not focus on the intentions, but the effect of the behavior. This helps to generate a genuine apology. Don't accuse the other person of being too sensitive. You should acknowledge their feelings and acknowledge the effect that your words or the situation had on them. Ask questions, accept feedback, and apologize, and then you can move forward. And another thing she mentioned throughout these last couple of chapters was if a person of color is willing to give you honest feedback in the situation like this, then they are trusting you.
Right.
And you should accept that as a gift.
And it's a level of vulnerability that I think, as white people, we have to really be aware of.
Yes, and love keeping. That's right. Now, one of the other things I'll skip back to this in a minute, but a little bit before that, she said racism hurts and kills people of color every single day, 24/7. We should be willing to interrupt it. We should look at it as something that's more important than our feelings, our ego, or our self-image. And we should be willing, and here's a whole list, to minimize our defensiveness. That's something, if we just shut up for a minute, we might be able to learn something, right? Demonstrate our vulnerability, demonstrate curiosity and humility, allow for the growth, stretch our worldview, ensure action, practice what we preach, build authentic relationships and trust, interrupt privilege protecting comfort, and interrupt internalized superiority. Whether we believe we have it or not, we all do.
Right. Yeah, you have to be willing to create the problem. I worked in a group home, and one of the kids always used the N-word. And I would lose my mind and go, you can't use that word in front of me ever, ever, ever. And he's like, what's the big deal? They don't care. And I'm like, I care. You can't use it in front of me. Don't use it. It's not okay. And he's like, I don't. And he's like, I hardly ever use it. And then we were out somewhere and he used it. And I'm like, someone's going to take you out. You're going to say it in front of the wrong person. and you are going to be laying on the ground because someone pops you right in the jaw. I'm
And
like,
you deserved it.
I'm like, you need to stop using that word. Like, it's like this casual word. It is derogatory and cruel. And I would just keep saying it over and over, and they would get mad. And I was like, I do not care. I am saying it, and I will be that person.
Mhm.
And I will, it's always our job. And sometimes it's difficult. Like I do it at work. I'm like, I'm always like, I'll say something to my coworkers. I'm like, that's not appropriate.
I did it a couple of months ago to a family member.
I did too. And you know what really makes me mad is that when I tell them not to say it, and then they're like, well, there's a difference between a black person
Oh my God.
and I'm like, no,
No, no,
no, ma'am, no, sir.
no. Remove that word from your vocabulary.
And if people of color
Right.
want to use that word, that's on them. But as a white person, shut
Mm-mm.
up about it. You never get to use it. Ever.
Right.
We
And
Another
then,
word that
and
doesn't have
then
to do
I
with,
feel like the bad guy.
yeah, no, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
you're right.
Then I feel like the bad guy because usually it's me correcting my elders, and it's
Oh.
like, how dare you talk back to your elders like that? But I'm like,
Wrong is wrong.
Right.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
Another word that I
yeah,
don't
right,
like
right.
is the F word.
Oh, I drop that one all the time.
No.
I was about to say, wait a second. Somebody else.
Multi-syllable F word for gay, a gay slur.
Oh,
Bad word.
That
Oh,
one.
yeah.
Sorry.
I was gonna say,
That
oh crap! I drop the F-bomb all the time.
Yeah, no, that's my pet word. That's my pet name. No, it's fine.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, well, so any term that's derogatory, right, is unacceptable.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it's our job. And I am so sick of hearing people go, but that was their generation. And I'm like, you know what? Let's just stop with that. They're old. I do not care if they're 80. If they have a cognitive brain in their head, then they can learn at 80 that that is a racist, derogatory term and not to use it. And
Unacceptable.
just because it was allowed when they were 20 years old doesn't mean it's allowed now. It goes right back to that, to the Me Too movement where women said, when men are saying, oh, we can't do anything, none of the women will let us do anything. And it's like, we never liked you to touch us before. We just have the power now to say, knock it the fuck off.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for the Black community. It was never okay.
No, it never was.
No.
And well, what is it? The thing that I find annoying is how, because I feel like that we should be becoming more conscientious. There will be different responses out there saying that we've become the phrase is a bad word, politically correct.
Oh,
Like, no, it's got nothing to do with politics. It's like decent human being.
right. Oh, I found out this pisses you off, so maybe I shouldn't do it anymore. That's not politically correct. That's freaking being nice.
Yeah, being a kind
Just
person.
freaking being a decent person.
Yeah.
Right. It's being educated,
Yeah.
being informed.
Yes.
Educated, informed, empathetic even.
Yeah. You're supposed to grow and evolve.
Yeah. So I don't.
How can you grow and evolve with that kind of mindset?
Exactly.
You can't.
You can't.
Speaking of education, in the final part of what I listened to, and I'll be honest with you, I ended up getting into a discussion with a client while I was trying to finish chapter 12. And I don't know if I actually finished the last couple of minutes, but the last notes I took were about educating ourselves and not looking for perfection in how to have these conversations, but if we are willing to do the work to discuss it, to repair the relationships, repair the trespasses that we make, if you will. White people do not often do this. We basically, a lot of the times, just kind of deflect the whole thing and don't allow ourselves to get uncomfortable. But if we are not making progress in this area, it is our job to read books and to watch
Right.
films and to look at documentaries and to have these discussions, watch other people's discussions like this one. If you're not comfortable in doing it, at least go listen to what other people are saying and talking about, because you can learn from that. And we have to live an integrated life and pay attention to what's happening. We can't just ignore it.
Right.
So feedback is very tough in the beginning, but with practice, it gets so much easier. And like we said before, getting feedback from a person of color is a step in the right direction, because it exudes that there is trust there. So,
And I would even offer, how we're talking about feedback and how it's uncomfortable. We, as white people or as a people, generally should know how to do that, because you even think, take it away from this topic we're covering, but in the workplace, when we're in the workplace and we're wanting to become a better contributing employee, and there's performance appraisals and there's performance management, they go through, there's matrices. Is that the right word? Matrices? Whatever. There's the things where different things where hey, this is what I need to do. The manager who has the responsibility, they come to you and they bring you constructive feedback. You take that feedback in, you go to your resources to improve the areas that there are opportunities, and you grow from that.
Right.
If we have that ability to do that in the workplace, we should be able to do that in our life. And not that there's some outside entity, but still that same ability to be able to take criticism, to seek outside resources to improve ourselves.
Well, it also, I think it can improve our own relationships, like existing ones, like our marriages and our relationships with our children or our parents or brothers or sisters or whatever. If we learn how to listen, breathe, give someone the space that they need, all of those things
versus intent, all of that.
It's just going to help us in all of our relationships.
Right.
Lauren's over here giving us praise in the comments. Thank you, Lauren.
Well, and it's definitely a big challenge, right? Like, I think if we can own that part, like, it's not going to always feel good, and it is going to be embarrassing when you say the wrong thing.
Mm-hmm.
And when haven't you been embarrassed in life when you've said the wrong thing? Like, it's part of human nature. So accept it and just go, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What can I do to make it better? That's my go-to how do I apologize? Not, I didn't mean for it. It's, oh my God, I'm so sorry. What can I do to make it better?
Yeah.
That's it. Like, I can't take back what I said. I can only go forward. And so, no one's looking to change history, the past history. What we're looking for is, how do we make it different going forward? And if we don't look at the past, we're never going to be able to change how it's gone. Because if people think that we're doing good now, we're screwed.
Right.
Oh God, please.
God help us.
We're so not in a good place right now.
No.
Not as a whole.
No.
There was something I was thinking about, and I lost it. Oh, I wonder, and I don't know how you guys are, but were any of us really taught to forgive ourselves, to give ourselves grace in life? Or have we always been on the defensive as a nation?
Well, I think as a country, we are probably the most arrogant idiots that exist, as I've traveled around the world.
Yeah.
Fair. Fair.
I have not been to other places that are quite so arrogant as we are. And I have a friend, she's in Canada, and she always says, you guys don't know anything about what goes on in the rest of the world. You live in your own little private world. You don't pay attention to the governments of any other countries. You don't pay attention to the people of other countries. Everything is how it relates to you only in America. And she's like, you are the only country that's like that. She said, in the history that we learn in Canada is completely different from what you guys are taught. The current events that we're taught. She's like, you just do not. We as a nation, we're not educated. We're not educated at all about other countries. It's only in relation to this country. It's never a separate how it's educated. I'm always amazed in the fact that I think they said what, like the percentage of Americans who travel abroad is so minimal that I don't see that changing.
That was the biggest catalyst for me to change myself internally, or to at least have the courage to do it. I always had something in me as a little girl that I just always felt like something was just not quite right. And I didn't like the way things were, but I didn't know what to do about it. And I didn't have the power to stand up, against the adults in my life, or whoever that was, or the institutions in my life. I really didn't have that. And it wasn't until I traveled and honestly got my ass handed to me a couple of times on some trips. And I learned a lot of lessons, and it was like, wow, yeah, I really need to get out of this mindset that I was forced into, born into, lived in.
Know.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
Lauren says, because we think we're the best and rule the world.
Yeah.
I know. I don't get that. I don't get that at all. Like, we're supposed to be in charge of everything.
Well, and it's funny because, like, I grew up always thinking that everyone just wanted to, like, everyone thought America was the best country, that the U.S. was the best. And then when I started traveling, and I was like, yeah, they don't feel that way.
No.
They actually love their own country the way, most Americans love our country. And I'm like, things are a little different than I thought. And
when
so
I was I went to Uganda for, a mission trip, and it was obviously the first and only time I'd been to, Africa. And I encountered in one of the marketplaces this small little child, terrified of me. I don't know that he had encountered a white person before, and I forget what he said. But he was terrified, like I was the boogeyman. And it got explained to me later that children were told that white people were black people, that their skin had been ripped off. And I was like, well, if that doesn't put a spirit of fear and hatred towards, I was like, but never having been exposed to that, I was like, wow. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Eye-opening,
Yeah.
Lauren says she's moving to Europe as soon as she gets her Italian citizenship finalized. Well, good luck with that. I know you can do it. Italy's the easiest way to get into getting a European passport, I have to say. If you have any ties at all to Italian history, ancestry, which I do not, even though I speak a lot of Italian. So
I know. I'm like,
sorry.
I'm sad that I can only the only other place I can get a passport is Israel, and I'm thinking that's not the safest place either. I'm
Maybe
like,
not.
between Netanyahu and Trump, I'm like, nah, not so good either way.
Gosh. Oh well. Well, is there anything anybody wants to say? We're about to wrap up here in our last minute.
No, just keep trying.
Yeah, let's keep trying. Okay, Lauren's going to adopt me.
Yeah.
I'll let you. I'm an orphan now. My parents are both gone. So you can.
It's the other thing I would say is do educate. Like, it's pretty easy to do today. Like, even on Facebook, if you look for groups, like I belong to the Black Wall Street group on Facebook, and they always post different. That's probably where I've learned the most. They're always posting different stories from the past from the Black community.
Mhm.
So they post a lot about their heroes, but they post a lot about events that happened that I had no idea about.
I should add me to
So
that group if you can. I would love to
okay.
be able to find some good writers even that would want a guest blog or
So
do an
that
interview or something.
yeah. So that aspect is really, there's so much out there today, with social media. You can really it's not like, you can Google like major Black history events,
Mhm.
and get information. And then there's always links to other things. So it's not like it was, 30 years ago, where you might have to actually go to the library and pull out books and find, some obscure book in the library. It's everywhere today. There is no excuse today not to be more aware of what has gone on in this country. And you can probably, in a weekend, learn more than 90% of the people in the country are aware of right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So I would say educate, educate, educate. That's how we're gonna grow and shift. And
So what are we gonna do next?
and be open minded.
right.
Yes, absolutely. So what are we gonna all do next? Do we have any plans for what's coming next?
I am starting October 3rd. I am actually facilitating a White Fragility project with my church, with the Racial Justice Action Committee. So I'm
Good.
going to be doing this all over again, except I'll be the leader of the group.
And you're
And,
prepared.
I am, and it's very, I'm excited. It's going to start out just being like the church members, I think, to start. But if it goes really well, we'll kick it off again in January and do like the entire community that the church is in. So
Nice.
I think I'm gonna try and get my coworkers to read the book. I keep thinking maybe I'll just buy a handful of them and drop them on the break room table and just go. I'm gonna be leading this, and I would love for you guys to be able to read it and talk to me about it.
Okay. Well, it
Yes.
sounds good.
Is that a cat?
Oh, sorry.
I was wondering what that was.
My
That's so
like, "Oh, I wanna
cute.
participate." Sorry.
That's so cute. I was like, oh, that must be a kitty up there.
Yeah, Kismet.
So anything you're doing, Elaine, or
Other than I'm getting ready for fall break, we're going to actually try to go to Gulf Shores, Alabama. So I've got my head in that, and yeah, I'm hoping there's this other book club that I've joined that maybe there'll be some other different types of books. I think it was a anti-racist book club that I found from one of my
nice.
friends in the neighborhood. And it seems like it's a fairly large group, so I am kind of curious as to how they're going to pull that off. But she's been a member for a while, so maybe it'll reveal itself as I participate. But it just seems, I mean, it was a large number, so I'm kind of curious as to, I don't know how do they meet?
how they do their meeting?
We're doing our book club. We're breaking it up into groups of 5. We're going to have 2 facilitators for each group.
Maybe.
So we're breaking it up into groups of 5 so that everybody can participate instead of trying to have a group with 30 or 40 people.
Maybe they're doing
So that's how we're doing it. So I don't know if they might do it. And I'm really excited. I want to read there's a couple books out there, How to Be an Anti-Racist, and then there's another one called White Rage that I keep hearing great things about, that is that's really like the Karens of the world, right? It's focusing on like the audacity of a person of color to be doing something that I don't want them to be doing creates this white rage. It's why all of a sudden you get the phone calls and the 911, like, how dare you be having a picnic, and just, I was going to do this, and how dare you be in my space, and all the bizarro things that people think of, like, I don't know.
Oh, well. Now, what
So
about you going to be able to find a place to commune in the city now that you've got a new city?
What'd you say? I'm sorry, you were breaking up pretty bad. What'd you say?
I'm sorry. I was just saying, what are you going to do? Are you planning on, finding some groups to get to know and maybe
Yeah,
get
that
involved?
is a huge thing. I know that moving to a big city, there's a lot more opportunity for that kind of thing as opposed to the very, very small town that I'm from. But I think what's most important is to just keep listening, keep being aware, be open-minded, um, be willing to um be uncomfortable, like we were saying earlier,
Mhm.
because of course these aren't comfortable conversations, but we can't. There's no growth. There can be no growth without being a bit uncomfortable along the way. Um, you know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I really
yeah.
appreciate being here. Thank you for coming into the group in the last couple of times. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for hosting
Yeah, it was great.
No problem. All
because
right, well,
we need
ladies
this.
and
We
gentlemen.
need this.
Yes, we do. This was good.
All
Nice
right.
meeting all of you.
Good. I've enjoyed being with you all over the last a couple months. Actually, it's been a couple months. So,
It's been
Yeah.
good.
all right. Well, thank you so much, and we're going to end that for tonight and have some dinner. All right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Okay. Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye. It was nice to meet you, Elaine.
Love y'all. Good night.
Bye, Keaton.
Good night. Love you
Nice
too.
to meet you, Lori.